Let's first thread this needle. This is one of 4 needles that comes with the machine. I think of the part that says Knitting Pal on it, that's where it says it, as the front. So with that in mind, we start in the back and go up towards the front through the big hole. Then down through the first hole in the blade, the large hole. And up through the next one, and down through the next one. There are some alternate ways to thread it for special stitches, but this is the basic one. Now I'm going to show you briefly how the manual suggests that you cast on, but I'm going to tell you I don't care for it and show you some alternatives. I begin all of my cast-ons with a loop already knotted into the yarn. Loop number 1 goes onto a peg. The manual suggests that you cast on from right to left. Actually, there are some options in that. But if we're going right to left, this is what is known in other circles, machine knitting and loom knitting both, as the E-wrap cast-on, because we're making the letter E around every peg. And after having wrapped the leftmost peg, we would then insert the tool and begin knitting those loops off. However, I find that rather difficult to do, and it makes a rather sloppy edge. So my preference, and I like to work this better from left to right, is the double E-wrap cast on. It also requires a second tool. This is an ordinary loom tool from any craft department. It's double in that we make 2 E-wraps. That first one is a little bit tricky because you just want to make sure that your yarn tail stays out of the way. Make 2 somewhat loose wraps and knit the bottom one over the top one. Tighten up if it was too sloppy. The goal is to have the wraps and the eventual stitch, because this is what we're ending up with, a true stitch, neat enough, tight enough to make a neat edge, and loose enough to be possible to knit the first row. There we go. In nearly all cast-ons, and all that I can think of really, it is important that you first thread the needle so that when you do begin to knit, your work can be continuous. Now, I've not positioned so that I can actually knit now. I'll bump into the camera, but this is where we'll start to knit off. I will attempt 1 stitch. The first one is the very toughest stitch. You usually have to rotate the tool. There we go. Oops, I got that splitting. There it goes. This yarn is quite soft and does tend to split easily. And now I'm out of space to knit. But that's how we knit it off. Maybe I can get one more in. And you can see those wraps from the back coming to the front now. A cast-on that I really prefer is to pull a good bit of slack through the needle and use a Tunisian crochet hook. If you don't have a true Tunisian hook, you can improvise with a regular crochet hook and put a rubber band in place of that stopper. And I take my knotted loop and make chain stitches. Let me try to get where you can see me. And I can see me too. We make however many chain stitches that we want to cast on, but we're not going to put the chain stitches directly on the loom. Okay. There's one loop on the hook, and it comes through that chain stitch. So those are already taken up, and they provide the first stitch that will hang on the loom and the first chained piece of edge. Pull up a loop in the second chain stitch, pull up a loop in the third, and keep doing that all the way across. It's these loops that we will hang onto the loom, and it makes matters easier and neater. For one thing, the loops are easier to work through in the future than simply wraps are. Even without a tool, I can pop these on. Also, we have a neatly chained edge forming. So I think this cast on looks very nice. If you prefer to, you can use your regular loom tool to position these loops, but you can see that you can manage without one. And now we're ready to knit. I'm set up in such a way that my right hand can't get where it needs to be. So we will try starting with my left hand. Oops, down, up, and stitch. Down, up, and stitch. See how much easier that is to knit off than either version of E-wrap. Plus, it looks nicer. We can also get a very nice cast on quite similar to the Tunisian cast on by using a latch needle or a crochet hook, but I prefer the latch needle. And this one is from a bulky knitting machine, absolutely any bulky knitting machine needle. You can buy these from sellers on eBay, and as long as they're in good condition, they'll work fine. And then we're going to crochet a chain right around the needle. The size and spacing of the pegs is what makes that cast on looser than we might like. We can get around that by casting on chain stitching around a knitting needle. This will make a very neat chain stitched edge too. Let's see, how many stitches have I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, good. Here's the 9th one. Now I'll hang these on the peg. I start with my working yarn at the right usually, but you can start where you want to. And we lift these loops one by one off of the knitting needle. I'm using a regular loom hook from an ordinary loom for this. You could also use any little tool that did the job. Crochet hook, a small one, seems obvious. This is very, very similar to the cast on made with the Tunisian hook, in that you end up with a row of chain stitches at the edge and an easier starting place than with the cast on that is E-wrapped. Ready to go.